Lee Baucom, I am so grateful that you're here. You have, based on your profile and the email that you sent me, I'm understanding that we're going to talk about saving the marriage today. And that is a topic that I want to dive right into because it's my biggest dream have always been to become married one day. I want to be a wife more than anything in the world. It's like this everything tying to becoming a wife and becoming a mother. That's what I've always wanted. But we keep seeing the statistics increasing in divorce. We see
Mm.
more and more attachment issues in relationship dynamics. And we see a world where dating looks harder than it ever has. And for me, that's scary because I want to save the marriage.
Ahead of time.
That was a very long-winded way of saying I'm very excited that you're here, Lee.
Well,
And
thanks for having me.
I want to understand what made you so passionate about this particular topic.
Yeah, so I was trained as a therapist, and when I did the training, initially they train you as an individual therapist, and then I got interested in families and couples. And I think the reason for that is because I saw some pretty bad breakups in my extended family. My parents are in their mid 80s and still happily married, and my grandparents were also happily married through their lives. But I had an uncle and a couple of aunts that not so fortunate and had some pretty ugly breakups. And I
Mm,
watched the destruction of what happened in that. So I think that's kind of what led me to be interested in what actually works in a relationship. So my training was as a therapist. And about the end, as I was writing my dissertation, like I was at the desk writing my dissertation in our tiny little house, and my wife was on the couch behind me, and I said, this is what I do. And it was an article about coaching. And
mm,
so she'd already walked with me through two masters and a PhD and said, what are you going to do? And so I finished my dissertation. And then I started 3 years of training as a coach. This was back in the 90s before coaching was everywhere.
wow. Yeah.
And I made that pivot and decided that since I had been concerned about why marriage therapy was not very effective, that I needed to talk about what was effective and did a lot of research and a lot of coaching to find out what worked. And that's what led to me first writing the piece of what became the Save the Marriage system.
Mm,
So that led me to work with tons of couples really around the world on and not necessarily couples, individuals who wanted to save their marriage, and
mm,
gave me an insight into why marriages get into trouble,
right.
which kind of leads us to here.
Yes. Wow. That is so interesting. Wow. That is a beautiful mission that you have. I do wonder what are some of the most common issues that people run into when their marriage starts to struggle?
So here is where it gets kind of interesting. If I were to name the issues, I would be telling you symptoms of the problem. So let's talk about the problem.
Let's talk about the
And
problem.
because this will actually give you a little insight on how you avoid the statistics. Now, let's go back to when people got together. You find somebody, you're interested in them, there's chemistry there, and you start building the relationship, right? And
Mhm.
so you're putting a lot of energy into that and forming habits of connection. And so you're creating this deep connection that at one point or at some point, the couple says, let's make this long term. And in a marriage, the idea is let's make this permanent. So you decide to get married or have a committed relationship. And from there, you walk back into life. So, recap, you've spent a lot of energy building up the relationship,
Mhm.
gotten to the point where you are committed to this relationship for life. Then you launch into life
Mhm.
without a whole lot of instruction on how to do this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now you're blindly flying and doing what I call on the job training without anybody to correct your mistakes. And so that's where we start this accumulation of the problem. So now the problem. So all the energy you put into building a relationship, you go, okay, we've got to do these other things like become parents or like launch a career or like do these hobbies or travels or interest or friends or whatever it is. And you go, we've got this, meaning the relationship. We got it nailed down. We've got this. So let's turn our attention to this. And so that is what I call hitting the pause button. It's the pause button on the relationship, thinking we'll get back to that at some point in the future, believing that you have the love it takes to carry you through. and not understanding that love was based in connection. So now you have this relationship and you hit the pause button, you turn your attention to these other things and stop attending to the relationship. So then you start creating habits of disconnection. And it's not for reasons like you don't like the relationship, you don't like the other person. It's we've got so much energy and now we're going to put it in these other things and our marriage will be okay because we've got love. Love never carries the day.
Right.
It's the connection and working together that carries the day. So you hit the pause button, and then as the disconnection begins to mount up, we humans, because we are such connecting creatures, start feeling the pain of disconnection. And often it's one person who becomes aware of it before the other and says, this isn't okay. This is something's wrong here. And that's the beginning of the kind of that spiral down of disconnection. It's already started. It's just that
Right.
finally somebody noticed it. The momentum finally started slowing down enough in their connection for somebody to go, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what happened. And so they don't know how to get back.
What you said at the beginning there, that we're all just going through it without nobody, like you're going into training, you're going into a training ground with no coach to let you
Mhm.
know when you're making a
Mhm.
mistake.
Mhm.
That was incredible because that's exactly what it is. We are all a set of, well, we're all human beings with a
Mhm.
set of experiences that shaped the reality as we know it, meaning that the relationships that we observed and the love that we received or experienced in our upbringing, whether it was from our parents or siblings or
Mhm.
friends, whatever it might be, all of that exposure is shaping the way that we view love and show up in relationships, from my understanding. And that is going to look absolutely different from everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that a lot of this conditioning is generational. So it's habits created over generations that we're observing and following into. And I can only imagine that two people who have a not the same upbringing, two people who haven't experienced the same thing, they're bringing their idea of what love and connection is into the
Mhm.
dynamic, and they might be speaking a completely different language.
Yeah. Yeah. So we all have those experiences and they do shape us. They at least start the foundation of where we're moving from, right? We have an understanding and we assume that what we saw is kind of reflecting reality. Of course, there's
Exactly.
also media. We're surrounded by
Yeah.
stories of happily ever after and things like that. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of that that also infects us. One of the things that I recognize, so for years I saw people, if they were getting married, I had couples come through my office if they were getting married in one of 7 locations in town, pretty much the bigger places. They had to come through my office for 3 visits. And to the person, they had a belief that they had already beat the statistics. Now, at least in the United States, if I were to walk down the street and say to somebody, what are the chances of a success in a marriage? They would tell me, somewhere around 50-50, somewhere
Mm.
around that. It's a
Yeah.
little better than that in the US, a little lower than that in other places, but let's just roughly say 50-50. And so I would ask the question, why do you think you're going to beat the statistics? Given that, I mean, if we're going to play odds, why are you thinking you're going to beat the statistics? And everyone felt like they had the love. They actually had what it would take, as opposed to the other people that didn't make it through because they didn't have the right kind of love.
Mm.
It's not about the love. So here's the thing that those couples think that they have the love it takes
Mhm.
without realizing that it's not the love that's going to carry them, that feeling, right? It's
Mhm.
not that. It's how they attend to the relationship.
Right.
And so, so we fool ourselves into thinking everything will be okay. And then as the disconnection starts piling up, as those habits of disconnection start piling up, then that's where we find ourselves in trouble because nobody has given us the skills to get out of it. And
Right.
then we're relying suddenly on our history, what we saw in our family, what we had in previous relationships. And that's pretty incomplete. Even if you had good representation of that in your family, that doesn't mean you knew what it was, the secret sauce behind it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where we have this vacuum. And so let me back up to those couples. since they already thought that they had beat the odds, they weren't particularly looking for advice on how to make sure they stayed in a good relationship. And so while A, we don't do a good job of teaching people what it means to be in a great marriage, B, the people who are getting ready to get married aren't really that keen on hearing it anyway because they think they've got it. They've already beat the odds.
Right.
And that's where we hit a problem.
Yeah. So what have you then learned is the key component to avoiding essentially the issues?
Yeah, so pause button, if that's the problem, then we want to make sure that we don't do the pause button. And that's so then when I say that, people are like, we can't stay as invested in each other as we've been. You don't have to. It doesn't take that much to keep it going, but there has to be something. And so we mistake the all the energy I put into building up this relationship as so that's what it takes to continue. It doesn't. It's kind of like if you push maybe a car. Like, I used to have bad cars when I was young, and I have to push them. And if it was at a standstill, it took a lot of energy to get it moving. Once it was rolling, it was easy to keep it going. And so in a relationship, you put a lot of energy into getting it going. Keeping it going, not as much energy, but it does require some energy. Eventually, it would run out of momentum, and then you're at a standstill, and it's harder to get it started again. So not pausing certainly helps the situation.
Right.
So if we talk about the kind of the where that happens, that we humans connect on kind of three levels. And
Right.
this isn't a you do one, you do two, and then you do three. It's all three are parts.
Mm.
And when I say them, you're going to go, yep, that makes sense. But I want to outline them because I think that helps. The
Please
first
do.
one, yeah. So at first, it's physical connection.
Mm.
And that is loving touch. Generally, if I say that in a crowd, they go, "Oh, you mean sex?" No, but yes, that's included. It's just that there's other loving touch, holding hands, hugging, kissing, pats on the back, all of that. And we share that with every warm-blooded creature. My dog is sleeping beside me, and tonight when I sit on the couch, she'll get right up against me because that's physical connection for her.
Yeah.
So we all do that, right? That's nonverbal. And then there is emotional connection, which is verbal and nonverbal, even as we've been talking. And by the way, this is something we do with every relationship. It's
Right.
just how we do it in marriage is at a higher level and a more meaningful level. So
Mhm.
emotional connection. As I said that, you nodded your head. That's nonverbal. You're telling me that you're on board with that, right?
Right.
It's also verbal. And so the verbal elements of that and the nonverbal elements are how we communicate two core things. One is that we get each other. So when my wife laughs at my jokes or I know something about what's of interest to her, we get each other, right? And then the other is that we support each other. Like when you're having a good day or a bad day, I'm there to support. Those are the two big pieces of emotional connection.
Mhm.
Can be verbal and nonverbal. And then there is a spiritual connection. And when I say that, people are like, oh, you mean religion? And my answer is no, but yes, because our religious beliefs do have some underpinnings of our belief system, of our values, what's important to us. And that's the arena of spiritual connection. What is most important? Our
Mhm.
deepest things, what we dream about, what we hope about, what we fear, what we believe, what we value. That's all that spiritual connection. That's
Yeah.
verbal. And that level is the one that many people would tell me that's where they fell in love. Like there's this person they're interested in, they had great chemistry with them, but then they had this conversation about what was most important to them and what they dreamed about. And that's where they fell in love. And then we stop having that conversation many times for many
Mhm.
couples. They
Yeah.
forget that is a different level of connection. That is our most
Mhm.
vulnerable parts that we don't share with too many other people. And so often that falls by the wayside after a couple of those conversations where you think you're aligned and you're headed the same direction and got that. It's like, kind of
Mhm.
like we've got the love, so that'll carry us. We got the spiritual connection, that'll carry us without recognizing that those things do change over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then you start disconnecting emotionally, spiritually, physically. That's where that pause button begins to get us.
Right. That is such a beautiful summary. And I was thinking about a lot of different things as you're talking. Of course, it's natural that you start to relate it to your own situation. And I mean, personally, in my own life, feel really connected to God, and I feel like that is the relationship that I have nurtured the greatest lately. And it has been in the absence of everything else that I wanted. I found so much comfort and solace in that. And to imagine a world where that would no longer be a priority is really strange.
Mhm.
And to kind of if I were to find myself in a situation where I was drifting away from God in my relationship, I have experienced that before, and that is also the furthest away I've felt from myself. But in my relationship now, I find myself praying even more, but it's with gratitude as opposed to demands, I suppose, or maybe like prayers and like, can I have this? It's more, thank you, I got that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
And
what's interesting is you note that we don't lose that spiritual piece of ourselves, right? I mean, that's
right.
there. It's
Yeah.
just we're no longer sharing it with a spouse.
Yeah.
And so that part of us that continues to change, mature, grow, whatever it's doing within us isn't shared. And so we're missing a piece of that growth that happens for everyone.
Hmm.
And we don't realize it. That's the thing. It's a lost piece, and unless people are conscious of making sure they're sharing those pieces. And so here's what knowing those levels makes interesting. We suddenly just named three targets to keep in mind if you're trying
Right.
to stay connected or if you're trying to reconnect.
I was gonna talk about that because I think there's this word that keeps coming up lately, and it's repair, and it's the ability to repair. And because of that, I'm also wondering because unfortunately, I've also observed marriages that had horrible breakups or marriages that failed for different reasons, or just marriages that are simply holding on. They're
Yeah.
happy, there's comfort there, but there's no love. It's more like a co-living friendship kind of situation. And as much as I think that's better than being in a abusive relationship in any way, shape, or form, I love love so much, and it's so important to me to feel the sense of being in love multiple times throughout my life. But I would want to experience that with my husband when I'm so lucky, right? So, how can one rebuild it from a place of contentment or complacement? But what do you say? From a place of
Complacency.
complacency, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So complacency is there are a couple of elements to it. Complacency can be, I'm just going to put up with this, right?
Mhm.
It can be a holding pattern while you're waiting for things to fall in place. And everybody may note some ups and downs of what's available to connect. Like when you're really, really busy, there's less of that. The complacency that is dangerous is when you go, okay, we're disconnected. I'm okay with that. We'll get along.
Right,
Because you can't do that. What starts to seep in is the hurt and resentment.
right.
And that cycle starts to pull it down. And so sometimes I've had people who would come to my office and they would say, I mean, it's okay. I don't think I want to do anything about it because it's okay. And then I'll see him a year or 2 years later and they're like, I'm really bitter now. I'm really angry about this. I can't continue this.
Mm.
And what's happened is nothing in their relationship except for the downward spiral of the disconnection that has taken them from fine, I'll put up with this to I can no longer tolerate this. And that's just a couple of turns of the spiral down.
Right.
So if you're at complacency now, it's a good time to say, let me unpause this relationship. Let me come back to that connection. And by the way, I just said, let me, because I think one person can start the process by
Right.
inviting connection.
Yeah. 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 What happens when only one person is willing to do the work and the other one is pretty much fine?
So that is the typical starting place for couples.
Okay, that's a good, that makes me happy somehow.
Well, it normalizes an experience that most people have. Let's kind of set up three different scenarios. One scenario is neither person is willing to work on it and they are just done.
Mhm.
There's nothing that I could do or anyone else could do. That's just over. Then there are those who both are like, yes, we are disconnected and we need to work on that. That's an easy one. Anybody could help with that.
Mhm.
That's just kind of making sure the conversation continues. Well, not anybody, but most experts could help some with
Yeah.
that category. That's when buying a book together and reading a book together could be very helpful because it's giving tools to both people.
Right.
That's not the typical. And nor is it the typical for both to be, I'm done, I'm out of here. Well, it only in the sense that that ends up being in divorce court.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
sets itself up. And I am not, even though I have a save the marriage program, I am not the person who thinks every marriage can be saved. In the
Mhm.
case of both people saying, nope, I'm out, that's a unanimous choice, and there's nothing
Yeah.
that's going to change that, likely.
Right. Yeah.
But if one person wants to, that's where it's typical. One person goes, this is not okay. Now, there are two possibilities to that. One is, this is not okay, and I want to work on this. The other is, they go, this is not okay, and I'm going to find my connection elsewhere. And that begins to be a threat to the relationship. And
Yeah.
that's often when the other person goes, wait a minute, I don't want to be completely out of this. And they suddenly are ready when their spouse is like, I'm now out, right? And so that's a different thing. So typically, when one person says, I don't want this, let's work on it, and the spouse goes, yeah, I'm okay. It's just a phase, or yeah, I'm okay. It's because they don't know what to do.
Mm.
And the roadmap is what's missing from that. So, what can one person do? That was your question.
Yeah.
A lot.
Good.
Those three levels of connection give you three different areas that you can begin to invite back in. So here
Yeah.
is that key word, is to invite. What I often see is a spouse suddenly chasing a spouse to get that connection.
Important distinction, I feel like.
So if my dog is in the backyard and I want her to come in and she doesn't want to come in and I go try to get her, she is going to
Run
run.
away.
And she's going to think that's a nice little game. So she is keeping the space for me. What happens if I go faster? She goes faster. And so that's the chaser spacer piece. Now, in a marriage, it's not a game, it's a distancing. I don't feel comfortable getting close to you, so I'm going to make more distance. And the faster you come, the faster I'll go. So that's chaser spacer. That's what I call that dynamic. And you got to be the pacer. So a pacer makes it more invitational. So back to my dog out back, she's running around. I need her to come in. I could take a treat and she'll come over to me because there's something that she wants there. And so now to humans, what do humans want? We want connection.
Yeah.
So if we can invite connection back in
Mm.
a way that a spouse can allow, then they often will move closer.
That makes sense. I told you in the email that I've been reading up on Alison Armstrong, and I'm mentioning her a lot lately in all the work that I do because she's quite literally changed my life. And here's why. I've always had, when I say always, since I want to say since I was about 12, 13 years old, so my teenage years and up till now, I'm almost 30. I've had a very hostile relationship with my father, and it's been strange because he was always there, but I didn't feel that love and connection as much as I did with my mom, which was incredibly evident and present. And I've had very troublesome situations with men when I've dated them.
Mm,
And as more as I've understood the attachment theory, I've also understood how the love that I experienced from my father also shaped the way that I believe I am worthy of love growing up. And that manifests deeper than I realized. And I've done a lot of healing in terms of reading up on attachment theory and really understanding my part of it and understanding how I could heal my wounds. And in the process of that, I have gotten a better connection with my father simply because I've invited for those conversations where I've been explicit and honest about how I felt, even how hard that was. But those times, as we've had those conversations, it came from a very accusatory place where I essentially, without using the words explicitly, wanted to blame him for all the wrongdoings in my past relationship that led to so much hurt and
mm,
heartbreak. it was a very conscious journey to get to forgiveness. But the only thing that has actually helped me do it and get to a place where my relationship with my father is better than it's ever been was as a result of the book called The Queen's Code that I read by Alison Armstrong. And that book invites women to look at men as who they are and not through the lens of what a woman would do. Meaning that I have approached a lot of situations with my father, talking to him as if he would receive information as I do, receive criticism as I, a woman, do. And it has made him shut down and become smaller.
Mm,
But with this new language that she's introduced to me, I am now able to speak to him from a completely different space and ask for things in a way that actually derives result, in a sense that he's helping me more. He's showing up for me because I'm asking him to. But what is also happening simultaneously is I'm being grateful and thankful for everything he's doing. I'm trying to collect points kind of in a way where I'm ensuring that I'm showing gratitude for the things I appreciate because because I experience it multiplying. Does that make sense?
yeah.
And it's simultaneously happening in my relationship with my brothers. I have two older brothers, and in my relationship with my boyfriend and male friends. I'm showing up completely differently because I have a newfound love and compassion for men just because I changed the way that I look at the way you think about things. And I could, of course, go into more details, but all of this to say is I've been so angry and so mad. And I have given up. I had conversations with my mom, like, I just wish I could break up with my dad, but you can't break up with your dad. You know what I mean? Like, I've been very mad and very angry. And now we're at a place where I am no longer bitter. I'm not holding on to it at all. And I'm no longer angry. And I just have this peace inside of me. And I think the reason why I'm mentioning it, all of this, is because I believe that there's other people out there who feel completely hopeless about their relationships with whoever it may concern, but it's so
Mm.
salvageable. Can you help me?
Salvageable, salvageable.
Salvageable. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
So can I pull a couple of things out of what you said
please do.
that are really strong? So one of them is there's a lot out there right now on attachment theory.
Yeah.
And I like the way you use that because what you said is you understood where that came from and then you decided to grow beyond it. There are lots of people who use attachment theory to say, this is just who I am. And they're stuck
Mhm.
there instead of this is a starting point. I have these things behind me. And that's not where you didn't put yourself in that cubbyhole to always say, well, this is how I attach.
Mhm.
Attachment theory has solid research on when it was applied to kids. It gets a lot shakier when it moves to adults because of exactly what you proved. You
Yeah.
can grow, right? You can change and grow and choose a different path.
Yeah.
Then when you move over to your father, one of the things I think was just to broaden it out a little bit, because this is true in all relationships, what you realize is your expectations were what was creating the relationship that you
Mhm.
didn't want.
Yeah.
You expected him to be a certain way, and when he wasn't that way, the disappointment, the frustration, the anger that came from that. So I want to draw kind of a careful distinction here that I believe that people do the best they can where they are. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean you have to tolerate anything anybody does. You can still say, I don't deserve to be treated that way. That's a boundary, right?
Right.
But you still recognize that people are who they are and do the best they can given where they are is a different frame of going, okay, dad was not perfect, but he was coming from where he knew to. He
Mhm.
was also affected by his history and the lessons he learned and
Yeah.
what he believed about all those things. And so the expectations, and this is true in any relationship, if you want to find the root of a lot of frustration in relationships, it's because we carry expectations
Yeah.
that are either unstated or unagreed to. And so those two things. So a lot of times we have expectations. We don't even know. We just think that's true. It's not that we think we have an expectation. It's just how things are,
Right.
except for they're not. And then there are the ones that somebody will say, I expect you. And the other person is like, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
Why should I follow that? And they may not even know they're doing that, but they are fighting against the expectations put upon them because they didn't agree to them.
Yeah.
So almost always when we find ourselves in frustration with life, we can look back and go, what expectation did I have that's not being met? And is that my bad or external to me? Was that fair for me to have that expectation?
Yeah.
And if somebody didn't agree to it, then you're probably carrying an expectation that's going to lead to disappointment.
Yeah, I uh I read a book called Soul for Happy by Mo Godot. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Mm.
he essentially states that happiness is reality minus expectation.
Yep. I
Pretty
have heard
simple.
that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And I remember when I heard that, I was like, yeah, yeah, it's 100% the times where my expectations have been too high that I've been disappointed. And also just learning to ask for what you want in a relationship. It's a lot of these cliches talked about like communicate your needs and say what you want and like all this communication, which is of course great. But then there's also the limiting beliefs that we have within ourselves. We're scared to ask for the things. We're scared to take up too much space. We're scared to be too much or expect too much or be hard to please. And I've also learned in this process that in all of this scarcity that I created within myself, it's coming from this conditioning. But
Mm.
at the same time, I've learned that all men ever wanted to do in my life was to make me happy. And I didn't even tell them how to do it. Like I didn't communicate, here's how I'll be happy. And lately I've been daring to say what I want, to be bold about the cliches. Like I want flowers and jewelry. I want date nights and this and that. Like just saying explicitly what it is that I want. Or this is like in a relationship, of course, but with my father, or with my brothers, just letting them know how they can be helpful to me. And all of a sudden, I'm experiencing this abundance. And it's also coming from a place of me actually believing that I'm worthy of it,
Mm.
which is probably a component we haven't yet like talked about because a lot of these marriages are probably also struggling because they have an expectation because they see what they want. Like you said, we compare ourselves to social media and what we see online. But we also have this limiting belief whether or not we deserve it, so we don't know how to ask for it. Do you have any guidance in your program that speaks to that at all, or any experience with clients that addresses an issue like that?
Yeah, so you're talking in some ways about self-defeating thought processes of
Hmm.
believing that you don't deserve love, which is a strange thing that we carry with us when we're talking about a loving relationship. You know, we enter into this loving relationship and go, I don't really believe I deserve that. That already we're at that. So one of the things that I suggest to people is their way of understanding a marriage, if they want it to survive, is to see it as a team, right? We're in this together.
Right.
And that brings it a little bit away from the do I deserve love into the how are we working on this as a team?
I like that.
A team is clear about what they need. So let's go just a sports kind of theme since everybody understands teams from that.
Yeah.
The goal of a team is to win. And the way you win is to communicate together and bring your best skills that you have that day to the game. You know, you're not going to always be operating optimally. That's just not human nature. But can you play your best that you have that day? And part of that is communicating how you're going to do it. So I play a lot of pickleball and I play doubles. So I'm constantly in this partnership and I watch how they work and how they don't work together. And one of the things I am well aware of is that when I step on the court, I'm watching my partner to see what I need to know about how that partner is going to play.
Right.
As soon as we're warming up, I'm watching. What do I need to cover? How do I need to play this so that we both can play at our best and I can be supportive?
Right.
That's going, how can we win this together, or at least do the best we can
Mhm.
together, right? And to never say, I'm against my partner. That's not who I'm against. I am for us working together as a team. When I watch couples who aren't in that team mindset, they are in competition with each other.
Yeah.
Whether it's competition about who's to blame, whether it's competition about who's doing more, whether it's in competition with who's not getting what they need, all of those come from that competitive piece because they haven't decided to be a team. So being a
Mm.
team gets you beyond a lot of that individual stuff because it's out of what do I want, deserve, whatever, to what do we need to do to move forward? How do we work
Right.
together as a team?
Yeah. I mean, it's so obvious, but at the same time, it seems like it's so hard to put into practice. I don't know.
Mm,
I definitely believe that it's possible. Of course, I do. It's just maybe it's that the language hasn't been used so often, therefore it doesn't seem so natural from the get-go. But of course, I understand. But I think we're so emotionally driven, personally, very
mm,
emotionally driven. I'm not going to say all of us, but personally, very emotionally driven, meaning that a lot of things that comes up in relationship too is because something has triggered in me that feels like offense. Now I'm defensive.
mhm,
So then it's already, but it's also being self-aware and recognizing your own triggers and learning to self-regulate, which has been tough. I must admit, I think self-regulating was really hard. I used to bring my relationship, my partners with me on the entire roller coaster in my relationship because I didn't know how to self-regulate. And of course, that's going to create tension because now there's this imbalance in the relationship and also a responsibility put on another individual that they shouldn't be having because
mm.
it is my responsibility to self-regulate.
Well,
But yeah,
and you so you talk about the emotional part of humans and said, I don't know if everybody is. Well, everybody is because that's how we are built as
right.
creatures. You know, our so you make emotional decisions that you then rationalize why you did that.
Yeah,
And so for some people, it looks like they're doing things from a rational, logical perspective. But we're all making emotional choices along the way and reacting along the way. And then we fill it in with our rationalization. So self-regulation is an important part. Mutual regulation for a couple is also being able to say, hey, I think we are, too far over our skis right now. We need to back down a little bit. We need to take a breath.
yeah,
To be able to see that so to use the scientific term, the arousal level emotionally is too high for us to have that conversation. How do we take it down?
yeah.
One of the things, so there are all the kind of the stereotypes of someone saying you just need to calm down that never, helps the process. I suggest that people think of it as how do I operate from my values rather than you need to calm down. Am I doing what I want to from my values? Do I want to react from my emotions or respond from my values? And if we are responding for, and this isn't going to be perfect because back to being human, we're not going to do it perfectly,
Yeah.
which is why we can say, I'm so sorry. I got too worked up about that. Let's talk about that again.
Mm,
But to be able to pause in the moment and decide that the values are what really matter
mm.
gives us a better platform. And
Right.
and that is there's that little space, as Viktor Frankl talked about, there's a little space between whatever happens to us and how we react to it that we can
Mm,
choose. And in that
right.
space, we can take a big deep breath, we can take a pause, and we can ask the question, how do I want to show up to this relationship? What's important to me in this relationship?
Right.
If it's just I want to win this argument, you'll go about it one way.
Yeah.
If it's a we are connected. So a little story. Years ago, my wife, neither one of us are loud people. So my wife and I were having a discussion, which is a way of saying we were arguing, but in daily tone, as we would.
Right.
And so I said something and she said something, and then she went to do laundry. And as I'm just pondering, because that's what I'm pondering, what do I need to say? I went, oh, if I say this, this, and this, then she'll understand. And so I walked down and I remember my finger was in the air, which is never a good sign. And she said, before you say something, I just want to ask you the question, is what you're about to say going to help us in our life together or not? And I went, never mind. Because that was not, we'd gotten to the point where it was not about what would help us move forward. We're going to have conflict. Every couple is going to have conflict. The
Yeah.
question is whether the conflict serves the relationship to grow, to move in a positive direction, or does it serve one to try to win? And many times couples they either avoid conflict because they don't know how to handle it, or they get to it to win. And the reality is conflict can serve the relationship
Yeah.
to help us find a better path forward for both of us together.
I love that approach, though, that your wife had there because it just speaks to the overall mission. I'm sure there's so many times within our lives that we will have little debacles for whatever it might be because we might have low blood sugar or just be snappy or whatever day of the cycle where we're just not as receptive. It could
Right.
be anything that triggered it in the first place. But overall it's not important, it's not that deep, and to be able to circle it back and be like, wait, hold up, what are we actually trying to accomplish here, which I think is beautiful, and also something I believe that I could bring with me into my relationship as well. I think that was great
Hmm.
advice because it's never about being right, it's about finding the truth, and I'm also very aware that I'm not always holding the truth.
Yeah.
I might discover it, but it's way more important for me to find the truth than to be right. I could be wrong. Yeah, and to have that humility, I believe, is
And
important.
and the truth you're looking for in this is the truth is a better path for our relationship. What would
Yeah,
be a better path forward?
yeah, yeah, exactly. What would be a better path forward? Yeah, how long have you been married, you and your wife?
38 years.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. Do you feel in love today?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that we've always worked on is staying in that connection. We went
Oh,
through together she and I both were in grad school at the same time. I continued grad school. And so we went through lots of years where we had to rely on ourselves. We were easily most of the time 12 hours away from family. Some of the time, the closest would have been 7 hours from family. So it was us.
yeah.
And we learned to rely on each other and to stay in our connection.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So yeah, so I'm assuming that what you've been good at is nurturing physical, the physical. What was the word you were using exactly?
Physical, emotional, and spiritual.
Yeah, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Yes, I remember the three, but I felt like there was like physical affection or something. Yeah,
So physical connection
connection.
is,
Connection
yeah,
is what
so
you were
they're
saying.
all levels of connection.
Levels
So
of
physical
connection. Yeah.
connection, affection is certainly a loving touch within the physical. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it all kind of speaks to, I feel like it kind of sums up love languages in one way too. It's just a little bit different way of looking at it, but kind of touching on the same points, understanding what your partner's love language is. But I think what I'm also understanding, the more I understand love languages, is that we all have some of it. It's just what is more important than others, but it all kind of sums up in emotional and physical, not so much spiritual, but of course, still a very important component as to what does a person value in their relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so okay. The danger of love language is when we use it as a shortcut. Like that's all I have to do. If I just do this because that's their love language, instead of recognizing that what we're trying to do is make sure we're speaking their language
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that they hear it most clearly and try to hear them speak it to us too, right? It's a bilingual process, not a trick. And that's what a lot of people miss in that it really is just saying, how can I clearly show you that you matter to me?
Yeah. That's so nice. How can I show you that you matter to me? Yeah. That's really beautiful. I think one of the things that I'm learning too in the Queen's Code is that men really want to provide for women, and they will do it when they understand what they can do that will provide happiness for her. I think a part of it is that, of course, men and women are different and receive things differently. Not to say that it should be this framework, but of course, it also depends on what kind of relationship one is in. But generally speaking, when how would you say it was for you to understand how your wife was responding to things as opposed to how you were responding to things, and how did you do you feel like you guys found some sort of language to understand each other, or is it just years of exposure?
I mean, there is part of it that is listening to see how the other person sees the world. one of the things that I think couples make a mistake is believing that they have to see things just alike. And that is an impossible task. It's
Yeah,
never going to happen. Every two people, and put any two people together, they're going to have differences in their paradigm, their way of viewing the world. It's
yeah,
just going to be because of experiences and everything else.
yeah,
And so I always suggest that people try to understand how their spouse is seeing things, not see it their way or have them see it your way, but to understand how they're seeing it. And I think it's always possible. You don't have to agree in order to understand. And so that's a conversation point, a curiosity point. So
yeah,
if I think that maybe we're at cross channels, I can often say, can you help me understand how you got to this? Like, show me your math to go
yeah.
back to school. Can you help me understand that? And then that's a, oh yeah, well, this and this. And sometimes when I've been asked that question, I'll start explaining. I'm going, well, this is ridiculous. I don't know why I actually came to that, but so let me remap that. And so even in the process of helping somebody to feel understood, they come to a different understanding also.
Yeah, I think that's pretty funny. I noticed this interaction with my brother and his wife because we currently live together, and where he would just say she would say something outrageous about how offended she got about something, and he was like, "How did you arrive
Yeah.
there?" Like, and it was really interesting to hear her thought process, and I could, which I found really funny, is that living with them is that I can see myself in my sister-in-law in so many ways, and it's such a mirror that kind of helps us talk through a lot of these things that we're learning and understanding and reflecting too, because we all have the same goal of wanting the relationships to work, to have
Mm.
strong and nurtured relationship in all the dynamics. Because right now we're living with my parents and my brother and my sister-in-law. We're five adults living together, which is really beautiful, honestly. We were all separated for many, many years, living outside of the country for the majority of 10 years. And now we're all living home together. But it's also something to be said about nurturing those relationships when you're living together too. And it's not only in marriages, but it's how you want to show up. It kind of goes back to what you were talking about when you were saying values. How do you want your values to reflect in your conversations with whoever it may be and in all
Yeah.
your relationships? Yeah, to bring it back to values. Do you think that is your impression that people haven't necessarily reflected on what they value?
I do think that that's often just an accepted fact of yourself that you don't really note those values. I've had people who would say, I just don't know my values. And my question to them is simply this: tell me the five people who you admire the most and one thing about what you admire about them. And as soon as they name those five things, I can guarantee you they've just named five values or five or fewer values that they hold most dearly because that's what we admire.
Oh, I had to think about myself now. What are my five people that I admire the most? That's a fun exercise. I feel like I would change my answer many times, but I mean, in the podcasting world, I suppose I really look up to the Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. I don't know if you know who that is, or if you're
Mm.
familiar with the podcast. That's someone that I've watched so many times because he has such an amazing ability to communicate with people in a way that makes them open up about really vulnerable stuff, and I think that's really admiring.
So what
But
is that value? What does he do that you value? Is it empathy?
curiosity, maybe?
Curiosity. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a value.
curiosity. Yeah, I value curiosity. I do. I mean, it's in my slogan, stay curious and get to know yourself better.
That is
Um,
actually one of my biggest values.
Really, that's interesting. Oh, I like that. That feels validating. And I really admire Alison Armstrong clearly because she's so funny and quirky and she seems to be a dope wife and a mother. And that is what I aspire to be, someone who's just fully at peace and giggly and seem like they're at their childlike energy in their 60s. And it's beautiful. I aspire to have childlike energy when I'm 60 and 70 and beyond.
So a value is to be playful, have childlike energy, and to see things from a quirky perspective.
Yeah, do not take
Those are
yourself so
values.
seriously. Yeah, just let yourself be. I've lived in a society where we're always looking out for appearances and we're always comparing ourselves to the next. And it's that reprogramming is still hard on me. I'm conscious about it because I want to just be blah, just do what I want to do and just be myself and not take myself so seriously. But I do stop myself because I do wonder what other people think. As much as I would love for that not to be the case, it is something that I'm still rewiring in my brain. But
So just
I
to
value it
draw that
nonetheless.
out a little bit, and this is a little off, but it's true for everyone. We can have a value that we don't fully embody yet.
Yeah, that's
And that
beautiful.
gap is what we grow into. That is
Mm,
our task of maturing is going, this is what I value. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm headed there. Instead of
yeah,
going, I'm not doing that, so I'm a failure at my value. You can hold a value that you're moving towards, and it always will pull you. There's another layer to it. There's something else about that. And as long as we hold that as what's important is moving towards a value, we grow.
yeah. Oh, I love that. That is such a beautiful way of looking at it. You can aspire to embody. Yeah. Another thing that came to mind too, which was kind of strange. I was surprised that it even popped up into my head, but it's probably because I've been watching this show in Norway where there's this he used to be a professional cross country player, but now he is taking disabled people, a group of disabled young kids. They're all between, I want to say maybe 10 and 18 years old, and they all have individual disabilities, and they're put onto this challenge to actually compete in a World Cup where they're doing actual cross country skiing with a group of actual professionals. And there was the first season was actually held here in my hometown because the World Cup in cross country skiing was in Trondheim, my hometown, last time. And in this show, essentially, what they're all doing is that they're sharing their disability, but they are starting from a point of incredible fear and disbelief. They really do not believe in themselves, even remotely. But at the end of that show, we see this progression of them overcoming their fear and breaking barriers and boundaries, and really, really moving towards what they deemed impossible. And I think that people who are barrier breakers are incredibly inspiring, and someone who is able to overcome their fears, that's also something that I suppose I value.
Those values keep telling you what to move towards. And
Yeah,
and so when you see something, you go, oh, that feels important to me, just make a note to yourself. And that is part of what allows us to load up those values. And the more muscle memory we have from that, the more often we move to our values, the easier it is for us to do that when it matters more, when the
yeah,
emotions are running high. It's kind of that muscle memory. You've rehearsed it more.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. This has been such an incredibly thoughtful conversation. I feel like I'm learning so much, and there's so much I get to reflect on as a result of this. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with me and for
Thank
being
you.
so thoughtful. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you want to talk about?
I think we have covered a lot of ground, right? We
Yes.
work from values, work towards being a team, see that connection is what matters, and that brings a long way towards what you want to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like I'm well away on it, mostly because I had the determination and grit and willingness to get there. And
Mm.
also kind of what you said introductory, this ability to see that I can become and not necessarily stick to where I'm at. Yes, I tend to be this anxious individual in terms of attachment theory and on the spectrum in that sense, but that doesn't mean that I can't be secure in a relationship. And that is what I am aspiring to. And that's
Mm.
why becoming secure with Mike's mindset exists.
Good for
Thank you
you.
so much for sharing your story with me, Lee. And I really am grateful for your time today.
Thanks for having me. And if people want to find out more, there are two places. One is if they go, oh gosh, I really am in trouble. SaveTheMarriage.com is a great place to go if you find yourself needing a roadmap on how to get back from that really broken place. But a lot of people are at the place where they've hit the pause button and they want to unpause because they want to avoid going with the save the marriage direction. And that is at unpauseyourmarriage.com. So savethemarriage.com if you're on the edge. Not so much, then unpauseyourmarriage.com is the Unpause app, which will help people to figure out how to unpause their relationship.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include it in the description below.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.